had a rounder's back. I just carried on hitting.
So the guy you done this crime with was an informant?
You start to develop an appetite for blood. I became modern day vampire.
So was your aim to actually chop his thumb off?
Yes, it was.
So did you rob banks?
He demanded what they have. I'm going to ask you one more time. I shot them both.
Did you think that they were dead?
I didn't care.
So was that true? Did you slice his throat?
I had international links with the Taliban.
Sitting across the table from me today is someone who caused absolute havoc across the city of London. He spent 27 years in prison, 7 of which in solitary confinement, alone with his thoughts. His crimes include 2 attempted murders and another victim who had a body part amputated. But since his release, he has turned a new leaf, one of hope and inspiration. But the question remains, can someone change? It's time to get unchained. Dwaine Yusuf Patterson, assalamu alaikum, brother. Welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity as well. I've actually conversing with you.
Pleasure's all mine, brother. So I want to start from the beginning. What was your relationship like with your parents and your siblings? Was it a difficult childhood growing up?
May I say something before I start as well?
Of course, yes.
Okay. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praises is due to Allah. We praise him, we seek his aid, and we ask for his forgiveness. Whoever Allah guides, none can misguide him, and whoever Allah leads astray, none can guide. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship but Allah, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his slave, servant, and messenger. Only through the remembrance of Allah does the heart find peace, inshallah.
Subhanallah. Thank you, brother, for that. That was beautiful. Okay, so was it a difficult childhood growing up? What was your relationship like with your parents and your siblings?
You could say that I had a very good upbringing in the sense of that it was very caring, it was very loving. I have 9 sisters and basically 5 brothers.
Wow.
I wouldn't say that there was anything which I would actually say that was alarming or anything that I would say that was of a dysfunctional family unit. I would say that, if anything, I was actually spoiled.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because at the time as well, obviously, my mother, when she conceived me, she was very young. And my father was. And so I think they went their separate ways. So at that time, being my mother's first child and only child, not only child, but eventually my other siblings came from my mother's side when she got married. But at that time, I was the only child. So I was kind of spoiled as well.
So you said that your parents parted ways at some point.
I don't really like to put words into their own mouths as well. But I think being so young as well, 17, 18, I don't think they've really understood the whole dynamics of relationships yet. They're still exploring as well. Yeah. And maybe I'm just a byproduct of that exploration.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was always love.
So did you think that had any effect on you when they split up? Because when children go through, a parental split, it sometimes can cause long-term effects on someone.
I think it can, but if they're both heavily involved in the development of the child, then not really. So for me personally, it never affected me in that sense.
What was your first memory of crime?
It's actually when I became a victim. So I think that caused a chain of events that there was no looking back. I used to live with my grandparents because my mum was still technically a schoolgirl herself. She was 17. So it was, even though I knew it was my mother, my parents in my mind was always my grandparents. My grandmother was the matriarch.
Yeah.
My mum married 5 years after. She married to my stepfather and she's been married ever since. Then we moved to a particular estate, which was called the Patmore Estate. So it was a separate entity from Clapham Junction. And I found that the youths were more harsh, and especially me being an outsider at the time as well. I always considered Patmore as actually being, at that time, was being like a Switzerland. So you had different groups that would actually be in Patmore, but they weren't actually living there themselves, but they just had good relationships and good rapport. But it all seemed like they universally disliked Clapham Junction, where I was initially from.
Was it like a postcode sort of thing going on?
Not so much in those times. It wasn't so much a postcode, but I think it was more like areas. So, people tend to gravitate to those that they feel that they can relate to. And I think you tend to have attachments. And the attachment was that, we're one group and Clapham Junction's a whole different entity. So there was a group of young men that, I can't even say young men, young kids, that every time they saw me and there was a couple of others as well, that they would give chase. And I think sometimes being young as well, that young people can be very cruel as well, and they can sense. They've got that predatory instincts as well. They can see when you're actually scared. For them, it gives them that kind of more motivation and drive. So I always had the ability to kind of evade them. But one day, unfortunately, with my mum, and it was always a heart-in-mouth moment every time my mum said, "Oh, could you go down to the shops?" Because I'm not gonna, obviously, my mother's my mother. We have great amount of respect for our parents. So you're not gonna blatantly say that, no, I'm not going. But at the same time as well, you don't want to stress your mother out to say that, look, there's a couple of local bullies maybe, and I'm a bit scared.
Yeah.
Because especially the mentality of those days as well is that you just resolve your situations.
What sort of a time are we talking about?
I was 10 years of age, so that was 1990.
1990.
Yeah.
I think between like the 1990s and like the early 2000s, like for me, that was like when I was young, and I experienced the same sort of things coming out. You never know if you're going to come back home. That's how bad it was at times.
So what actually happened was I was approached by a group of, young children, and they asked me to remove or to relinquish my jacket.
Right.
I basically said no, because I've always had that sense of I'm not going to allow anybody to try to intimidate me, and especially remove something that my mother's worked hard in order to provide for me and my father. I refused. With that, it resulted in me being set upon by a large group of young children. At the time, I never understood it because I was being kicked, I was being punched, and I was crying out for help. And there was adults who, when you're young, you look at the world differently. I looked at the world with lens of that adults are your protectors. So when I'm crying out for help and adults are just walking past, in my mind, everything changed. I saw it now as survival of the fittest. But now, being the age that I am now, I understand that survival of the fittest is just a mere justification for destroying and oppressing people much weaker than ourselves. But being so young, you don't understand that. You just always been told that you go to an adult if there's a problem. Those adults never helped me. So I understood that I needed to take measures into my own hands. So eventually, I was taken to the hospital by my mother. I said to my mother actually reminded me of this. She actually said that I turned around to her and said, it will never happen to me again. And that was the turning point in my life where I decided that now I'm going to be the apex predator. I'm not going to allow that. And one of the concepts that being so young that you actually used was that you go for the biggest one. How did I establish myself amongst my peers? I made sure that I approached the ringleader and I caused some harm to him, which actually resulted in me gaining the respect of my peers. And it just escalated from there.
So how did you do that?
Unfortunately, at the time, I had a rounder's bat. So I approached the individual. He was with some of his cronies at the time. They're still kids, so we have to, no name calling. And I just carried on hitting him. I think it was the adrenaline. I think it was just mixed with, it was a concoction of many things. I think it was just the fear of if I stopped that I could also, it could actually be a repeat. At that point, I realized that these individuals are actually more scared than I was. And they display it in different ways. So they display it in targeting individuals that they believe that they could actually get away with.
People that they think that are weaker than them.
That's correct. But now that I've demonstrated some level of strength, I realize that they're more scared than me. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is you start to develop an appetite for blood. So I became like a modern day vampire. That's the truth. I felt that it felt good. It felt good to be acknowledged. It felt good now to see that the tables have turned. And then I became the very thing that I said I will never become. Exactly the same.
That's interesting because one of my last guests in private, I asked him if he believes people are born evil or they become evil. And he seemed to think that people are generally born evil. What do you think about that?
Is one born? Yeah, I think there's choices, and depending on the choices that we take will determine on regards to how we become. But yes, there is an understanding that some people's evil outweigh their good. So sometimes it's better just to leave them be. I think that's my kind of understanding in regards to that kind of concept. Some people are so removed from levels of empathy, humanity, that unfortunately the best way is to actually keep a safe distance from them. If you don't, they will probably affect you with their evil characteristics.
When I was listening to your story, I found a lot of similarities between you and I. Because when I was about 15, I was also jumped by a gang. And I remember actually quite the opposite. And there was a lady there who had a dog, and she said, if you don't stop, I'm going to let the dog loose on you lot.
Okay.
And I, ran to a shop and got away from them all. It could have turned out really bad. So
Definitely. And especially being so young, I was 10. So it changes. And sometimes individuals don't understand as well that a young person, we know that the most formative years of a young person is from 1 to 7. But we know that the mind, especially of a child, is still developing even after that. So we become like sponges and we soak up so much information, whether it's for the good or whether it's for the bad. So these are things that we need to have as social awareness as well. Sometimes individuals blame the parents, but it takes a village to raise a child. And I say this with all due respect, because if you look at the dynamics of today's society as well, that sometimes parents haven't got that time. So the most formative years of that child's development is from the teacher. So we need to make sure, we need to be aware of what schools that we're putting our children in, the type of interactions, who are the teachers. Because let's be honest, a parent sends their child to school, they're working the time they come in from work, they're probably cooking, maybe enough time for them to do their homework, and then it's back to bed. So the only kind of interactions that they may have, if they're not working on the weekends, is weekends. But most of the interactions that they're going to have and their development is going to be by the teachers. We need to also understand what type of teachers are we introducing our children to.
100%, I completely agree with you. We're sending our children to these institutions, and we half the time have no idea, what they're being told, what they're being taught, and that's where children get their ideas about life. Then in turn, it's hard to put any sort of blame completely on parents when, as you said, the children most of the time are being raised by teachers, because this society, the way they've built it up to be, is kind of to break that family unit. There's nothing wrong with women having careers, but they've kind of made it, a bad thing for a woman to want to, stay at home and be a housewife and raise the children.
They've made it frowned upon, so they've applied pressure even on those young ladies that actually says that I actually want to be a mother. Now the concept is, no, you're lazy, you need to be working. But that's her choice. She has every right to. Whether she wants to work, we support her. Whether she doesn't want to work, we support her. Because we know that the hardest occupation is raising a child, being a mother. We know that's the hardest occupation. And you can't knock that. That is a job in itself.
100%.
So I think that sometimes as well that we can be very insensitive and we can be very cruel. And we don't understand the magnitude of what it takes. I will never understand what it takes to be a mother. But all I would actually say to the mothers, I stand in solidarity with you.
Moving on to, the crime that sentenced you to, I believe, was it 5 years?
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Can you go into that What happened? What led up to it?
Yes, I will. And I would like to say it again as well, because sometimes there's some misunderstanding. First and foremost is this is never a glorification. This was also a young person that went through a very traumatic event. So again, I apologize, but there comes a point in your life as well that there's only so much apologies that you can do. The best thing that I can actually do for community as a whole is continue to live the path of righteousness and to make sure that nobody repeats these kind of atrocities ever again. And that's what I intend to do. So this is not a glorification. This is not something to be boast and bragging about, just so that viewers are actually clear about this.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to echo that. This show, although we are talking about certain things, the overall message is to avoid these things and inshallah come back to the folds of Islam and do the right thing. So this is not a glorification of the things that Dwayne has been through and experienced. We are talking about his life in order to prevent more people going down that path.
Thank you. So yeah, I felt that it was kind of unjustified. But in the time of a young mind, when you're a young person and in the mind of a young person, it's justified. I didn't like this young person. I was 13. I think he was a year younger than me, and he had an older brother as well. There was a group of them. I did not like him. I think I used that as justification in order to implement what I was going to do next. And that was amputate his thumb. On that occasion, we happened to stumble across him. I didn't like him already, and it was totally unacceptable and uncalled for. And I produced a knife, and his thumb came off.
So was your aim to actually chop his finger off, his thumb off?
Yes, it was.
What was going through your mind? What made you come to that conclusion that, I'm going to chop his thumb off? I don't think something like that would enter my mind to, chop someone's thumb off. So what was your mind state at that time before you went and did this?
I think as a young person as well, again, as what we've spoken about before, when you ask me that, is some people born evil, or can it be like a product of the environment that makes them eventually become evil? And I will say that sometimes when you engage in things that we know that are totally un-Islamic, but also totally wrong on a humanitarian level, sometimes what tends to happen is as well that you tend to justify, no matter how warped that it is, you tend to justify and it desensitizes you, not understanding the true magnitude of what you're actually doing. I don't care. I don't like him. Yeah, let me teach him a lesson. And I know that it's very hard for viewers to understand that. But when you're involved in particular degrees of dysfunctional behavior, then to us, it's kind of the norm. We're living very traumatic lives. And you have to also take into consideration we're still kids ourselves as well. Because I know there's been arguments about this. Oh, but at that age, you know what you're doing. Yes, I knew that I was doing, but did I know the magnitude? Did I have victim empathy? Of course not. I'm young. We don't. It's just like being in a classroom and you're making fun of another kid. I know that you can't compare the two because it's totally different. I actually used a knife. I actually stabbed a young person, and many young kids are dying out there. So I understand that, to be fair, to compare and contrast, but that's the only thing that, in order to allow the viewers just to have that kind of understanding that there's no justification for it. It was at the time I made a mistake and I paid the price for it.
If you could run it back a little bit, on the day, you went out there trying to find this guy?
No, I just stumbled across him.
You stumbled across him?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. So I was in a block of flats. And what you tend to do is, you tend to intimidate first. So you go like, yeah, what have you got on you? And because they're outnumbered, there's more of us than them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you're just waiting for anything so you can justify. I know, it's very weird. You know how it
Kind of
goes.
like, give me a reason, yeah.
Yeah. And then sometimes you grow more in confidence if you see the fear oozing from that person. Because there is an element of fear. You're surrounded by large groups of children. You're a smaller number. You're not a bigger number. And then the situation happens.
So what happened with this one? How did you end up getting caught?
Obviously, families and so forth know each other. Individuals knew. So obviously, the individuals that were there with that young person actually pointed me out.
Ah, okay.
So the police came to my mum's house and arrested me.
How did that feel when the police came knocking on your door?
It wasn't a pleasant experience because it's not like the police of... I know that people are saying that they're having problems with the Metropolitan Police and other police forces now, but especially in the 80s and 90s, they were definitely not soft on crime. So their whole mentality, if we look back now, it's actually, technically, it's kind of child abuse. If you gave them mouth in those days, they'll slam you on the floor. There was a lot of horrific things that were happening. I remember them placing me in a police cell, and I'm thinking, being so young, that's actually illegal. You shouldn't be locked in a police cell.
How old were you at this time?
At the time, I was 13.
13.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Sometimes our parents had a lack of understanding as well because they just saw it as the norm because they grew up through the era of being treated a certain way, even though my family's never been in trouble with the law. But just things such as, I know in my father's time was just like the sus law and so forth, the stop and search. Yeah. And lots of, black and brown people were being stopped and unfortunately being harassed at that time. It was exactly the same kind of process. Growing up, I remember playing football with a few of my Caucasian friends, me alone being pulled aside and being searched when I was something like 11 years of age without any parental guidance there. That's illegal. By that time, it was just like, yeah, well, if the police officer stops you, then that means that they stopped you for a good reason. And things such as that. That was the mentality of the society of that time.
I've been there, bro. Just walking on the streets with your friends and then all get searched on the act of terrorism or whatever they call it. And, all you're doing is just walking on with your friends.
100%. So it was a very difficult time. So, yeah, obviously I was not treated pleasantly because I was considered now as being a criminal. Yes, I had done a criminal act, but I'm still a human being. We still have feelings. I'm still human. I'm still a child.
So as a child serving the sentence, do you feel like it gave you more anger inside?
Yeah, because you could actually say as well that I saw the nature of human beings. And I've realized that sometimes human beings can be very unpleasant. So being so young, and I would say, because sometimes people pose a question that, oh, you're this anti-authority. I say no. But you have to also understand as well that the level of trauma that I was subjected to at such a young age. For example, because I was a bit too young in order to go to Feltham Young Offenders, you had to be 15. So before that, I was in secure units. And how the workers would actually treat. So we're talking about, I do jiu-jitsu. So you can talk about like certain moves like knee on belly and so forth. So a full-grown person putting a knee on your back or on your chest, choking you, bending your arms back. You're a child. And they take great joy and satisfaction out of inflicting pain. Just want you to scream or shout. So obviously you harden. You start looking at the world as the world being like this. Because remember, you're still developing. We need to understand this. As a child, your brain is still developing. So is this what we need to become? So you see the place of what is supposed to be rehabilitation as a place of a gladiatorial contest. It's a coliseum. And this is how you start seeing it. You see it like Hunger Games. It's a baby fight club.
When what you really needed was someone to maybe put their arm around you and say, there's a different way. But instead they're putting their knee on your back, as you put it. I could imagine what might have been going through your mind or another child's mind. Their mental state is probably spiraling at that point.
Of course, and it's kind of sad as well because we don't help. If I heard my friend scream or shout or cry, then he's an object of ridicule now. We're saying that you're not a part of us, you're weak. Not understanding that he's just doing something that is human, that if something hurts, it hurts. Pain pain has no limits.
So what happened once you were released? I mean, did you start getting back into crime? What sort of things were you getting up to leading up to your long sentence?
So eventually I went through the Feltham Young Offenders and so forth. But it was a bit different because some people posed the question as well. But you didn't learn the first time. So why should we have any sympathy to you? What I would say to the viewers as well, you need to understand that in those times, there was no such thing as rehabilitative courses like now. They had a concept, you do your time and you get out. It was very harsh. You have to also understand in those times, especially in Feltham as well, it was 23 hours behind your door, depending. Once you got onto like a long-term as young offenders wing, then you had some more hours out of your... But the reality of the situation, having so much young kids warehoused, there's always bound to be fights, and that means everybody else is behind your doors. You didn't have television, you didn't have all these complementary items that you might have now. So it was hard. The officers were harsh. They were more military trained, so they had a more military approach. You do your bed packs, you tuck in your shirt. If you don't, they drop you. So this is the kind of mentality. They even encourage you, and that's why I said it was like a baby fight club. They would even encourage you that you resolve your situation by having a hand-to-hand combat. So we kind of grew up saying that, well, if you disagree with somebody, then you just punch them in the face, because that's what we were taught. Not knowing that in society, you would not survive 1 second being outside. You're considered as a degenerate. You're considered as somebody crazy that definitely needs to be away from the functioning of society. But at that time, this is what you're taught. So as soon as you're out, you have that same mentality, that mindset, because this is what has actually been taught. If there's any lesson that you've been taught, is that you need to be tougher than the average person. You need to know that once you implement violence, it needs to be extreme violence. I think the difficulty was, especially being that age as well, and so I was released at 18. My mindset's, it's in limbo right now. It's like a pendulum. It's going back and forth. I understand that, life now has become a labyrinth, and it's difficult because at the same time, I want to make those changes and adjustments in my life. I'm not given that opportunity, but I'm still suffering with low self-esteem, low self-worth. It all started off me trying to get a bank account. I couldn't obtain a bank account because I had another conviction as well. Attempted robbery of a building society at Abbey National. And at the time, I was 15. Because what actually happened was, I was in Stamford House, but I went on the secure part. I still couldn't leave the premises because it was a sensitive case. I was young. I absconded, and then with a group of older kids, I went to rob, which in those days they called it steaming, an Abbey National, which eventually I got caught in. I think it was 96. I got convicted for it whilst in prison. The police came. What they wanted me to do as well to solve, they had a lot of unsolved cases in regards to building societies, post offices, and so forth. And they believed that I'd done a string of them.
Right.
One rule was, if you've not been found guilty for anything, you don't just admit to anything. You always say not guilty and so forth. I totally declined. Which, when I was then released, for some reason, I was having a problem having a bank account. It was like I was blacklisted. So I remember speaking to my father. My father was saying, "Son, you just need to have patience." Because my father's very soft-spoken. He's very calm. And he was like, "I respect you." In my head, I'm thinking, "I respect you, Father," but I'm not listening to that right now. I'm trying to make some changes and nobody's giving me that opportunity, even though I did have chances because I was boxing. I was doing very well with the boxing. There were people that were prepared, but I think I didn't have the right mental capacity at that time. Because remember, we were like, the only way I can describe it, like universal soldiers. In that film, we were trained for only one purpose. In prison, it was just fights, it was just mayhem. Came back out, the world has obviously changed. It's different as well. My insecurities are kicking in as well, because before that, I was used to having everything done by my parents. I'm a minor. Now I'm 18. I'm considered as a young adult. I have to do everything by myself.
We do all these forms and all that now, I've heard you say.
Yeah, so it was very strange. And then I gave up and I said, let me try to reestablish myself in a fast-moving world. So what happened? I went back onto, my estate. Obviously, the young people at the time got older. They were doing more sophisticated crimes. And I just slotted in. I just understood the kind of dynamics, the role that I play.
Was that because you felt like you wasn't getting any opportunity in, the normal sort of world? So you turned your eyes to crime?
I felt that at that time it was the easier option for me, not understanding that it's more risky than actually working 9 to 5 and doing the legitimate thing. From there, I was committing some atrocities within my community.
So did you rob banks?
I will discuss a bank that I did because I was convicted for it.
Okay.
So as you're aware, we're going to talk about my double shooting, but I've also got another conviction as well, and that was robbing a bank, which I actually got 7 years concurrent. So 7 years to go along with the life sentence that I received. So we can discuss that. Anything else, then obviously, as you know already, because of my so-called reputation and so forth, then we know that sometimes, unfortunately, that people can actually misconstrue what you say, and I don't want any kind of misunderstanding. But yeah, I do have another conviction of a bank robbery.
And was that planned, or was that just like the opportunity?
Once you slightly became older, then obviously things become more calculated.
Because that's completely different to just going up and robbing someone, isn't it? Jacking someone. That's would take planning, wouldn't it, to actually pull that one off?
This is a rule that we used to establish as well, that you shouldn't really involve civilians. You tend to engage with only those that are involved in what you're involved in. So it's an occupational hazard. So it becomes like a spaghetti western. Who draws first wins. Sometimes you're more even reluctant because we understand that people could say that, well, there's innocent people that actually work in the banks. They're civilians, and it's probably traumatic, and it is. And apologize for whatever kind of trauma that they're going through. And I really hope that they're getting the help that they need if they are suffering with any kind of traumatic event. But we can say that we never harmed anybody within that bank. Nobody got touched. We used to justify it all the time, like robbing other so-called criminals. And that's where we got the kind of justification. But nothing should really justify that, because they're still human beings as well. I don't know their circumstances. I don't know the reasons why they're doing what they're doing. Even for example, I had a large group of friends. There was many of us. And we will break up into different subgroups. But now and again, when you're going out, you want to show off of what you have and from what you don't have. Everybody would, and then you would go to a club and so forth. Even in those short period of time, those 2 years, there was some of my friends that I didn't really know their living conditions until when you were in prison, and you realize that they had to do that rather than some of us, where we done it because in our heads we said that, we want to have a better standard of living. But with some of these other young men, they had to, because they were going home with basically no food in the fridge. Their whole dynamics was totally different. I remember entering certain friends' house as well, and the living condition is very poor. It's very, very bad.
I think everyone's got it in them when they're backed into a corner, and especially if, you've got children or something like that. I think everyone's got it in them to go down that route if they're, put in a position where they had to make a choice.
And not only that as well, remember, I was never dragged up. I was brought up. There were some individuals as well that their whole family lineage has been based on criminality. So the likelihood of that young person engaging in criminality is going to be a high percentage, because they're also being encouraged to become criminals. where that my family never done that. My mother has never been in prison. My father has never been in prison. None of my siblings have ever been in prison.
That's why I'm trying to pick your brain, because you actually had a good upbringing. You had a good relationship with your father.
It was that one moment.
It was just that one moment that changed everything. So when you're committing these crimes, did you not ever stop to think about, maybe what your father would say to you? Or
Of course, it was very stressful times because, again, it takes a village to raise a child. So all my family got involved. I stayed at numerous amount of uncles and aunties' houses as well, saying that, let us take him off your hands. Let's see if we can make a difference. Let's take him away from the area and so forth. But I kept on coming back. So I always say it's also a state of mind as well. If the mind is not sound, then there's always going to be problems.
would you say you were addicted to crime?
I wouldn't say that. I would say I was addicted to reputation at that time, being young. I wanted, because for me, what was scary is the other side of that, not being respected. Not being respected was becoming a victim, and I never wanted to face that again. At times, even when I committed an atrocity, I call it atrocity now, because we're dealing with human life here. We're dealing with human emotions. At times, I would actually feel sorry. So on a personal level, by myself, I'd think, but I had to. I felt like I had to.
To keep that persona up.
Because we know that it's shark-infested water here. So if you show any signs of weakness as well, then those that are even underneath you are going to track you down.
Watch this space, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Even those that you're shoulder to shoulder with, can you really trust them? What is their true intentions? What is their true motives? So it's horrible. So it's nothing glamorous. And we're talking about from grassroots level here. We're not talking about we were multimillionaires and we was this. No, we, for our age and so forth, but it was nothing. Like, let's be honest. We were penny pinchers.
I mean, it was a short period.
2 years, yeah. But it is though. That lifestyle is a short period of time. Unless, and this is what a lot of individuals don't acknowledge. Like, I give you an example. Sometimes what these young people do as well, they will try to give themselves names and titles of individuals that in their eyes, that they've watched in the movies, and their eyes that are respected. No disrespect. If you look back into their lives as well, a lot of them are the things that, if we were to do that or implement that, would be frowned upon in society, would be social outcasts, would be pariahs, would be leopards. What do I mean by this? For example, because they're cartel bosses and so forth, they're working with the police, so they get rid of their rivals. To us, that's informing.
Yeah.
But people don't see it like this. Because he's a cartel, he's making millions, so it's okay for him, but the person that's only getting a few thousands and he does it, everybody condemns him. But the person that you're praising is exactly the same as that person there. Where's your morals? So can you understand how things shift? Or, these cartels, get rid of the whole family. To us, we'll look at that with, that's despicable. Because why? These are innocent civilians. What have they got to do with it? You get the person that is engaged in what you're engaged with, but then they will praise that person. No, you're a child murderer. The society like child murderers. The society like rapists. So it's actually crazy what we actually praise and who we try to aspire to be. And when you really look deep into who these characters are, that they are the most despicable human beings.
I feel like the youth are just constantly confused with, like music and movies, and they're constantly being told opposite things. Like it's cool to be a gangster and in the music, and it's cool to shoot up people or this, that, and the other, like they're told in the movies, and at the same time they're being told you need to have this, that, and the other to be considered a success. But they're never really being shown, the actual truth is that, you need to be an honest, hard-working individual. Do you know what I mean?
100%. But to be fair, though, people are sometimes a reflection of their environment. And what does society say as well? society has placed so much pressure on so many people now. In order for you to be respected, that you need to be somebody, you need to have wealth. We see this on the social network. Yeah. Like, people are given this kind of false perception of what they really have, and the reality is not that. So to be fair though, society has placed a lot of emphasis on, and especially that if you're vulnerable to these persuasions, let's say.
And it's that reputation, because I used to be a rapper and I knew rappers within the industry that when we used to meet up at the studio, they'd arrive in an old banger. But in the music video, they've got hired, sports cars, this, that, and the other.
Perception,
and, trying to force this reputation.
100%.
So if we can continue now to the crime that led up to you to serving 22 years in prison, go into what happened before that, what was going through your mind and why you did it.
So to be fair, I received a phone call from a friend of mine. He said he had some information stating that basically these guys were operating in different degrees of dysfunctional behavior. I don't want to put nothing out there. Yeah. So we went to the premises and we demanded what they have, for them to relinquish what they had. I think they never really took us seriously because, first and foremost, is we're young. They're more established. They're like roughly my age and slightly younger now. So it's like a 19-year-old, 20-year-old coming to you. You're really underestimating and I'm not proud to say, I done something that was totally unacceptable. I warned them. He gave me an envelope. It's full of money. I said, what's this? I said, do you know what I've come for? He was persistent. So I literally said to him as well that I'm going to ask you one more time. If not, I'm going to produce my gun and shoot you. And that's what I actually done. So I produced my gun and then the rest is history. I don't really want to, so I shot them both. And it was a horrific shooting. They survived, I thank God, alhamdulillah, because we know that we'll be held accountable for everything. So I'm happy that I'm being punished in this life rather than in the next. The mercy that God has given us as well, that if we're punished for our crimes in this life, we won't be punished in the next for that particular crime. So alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. So I shot them.
Did you think that they were dead when you left the scene?
To be fair though, I'm going to be honest, and this is my mindset, and I apologize to viewers as well. I didn't care. I saw them as, again, it's occupational hazard. We're all involved in what we're involved in. I have no mercy for you. This is it. I asked you a question and I had this kind of warped way of thinking. If you show your gun, you use it. There's no point in discussing something and just waving it around.
It's going back to that reputation thing again, isn't it? Because if
100%.
you don't use it, they're going to say, he pulled it out, but he didn't use it.
But it's silly though, because all it showed that I was a weak person. That's it, you're mentally weak. A strong man, what did our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? He said, the strong man is not the man that overcomes the people with his strength. The strong man is the man that can control his temper in times of difficulty. This is it. Who are we? We're nothing. Wallahi, brother. We are nothing. We come from nutfa. You know what nutfa is? It means male and female discharge. That's what we come from. We're so arrogant. We look at ourselves and say, look at us. We're better than you. Look how I look. Do you know who I am? Who are you? You're a slave of Allah. Humble yourself. Humble yourself before you are humbled. So for me, it was an eye-opener because eventually I was a menace and I was humbled. Look, we were fledglings. Let's be honest here. We talk, sometimes people have this concept that, I was this big gang leader. I run this. What did you what? At 19, at 20 in this country? Yeah, maybe in another country, but we're not advanced like that. So you had millions and millions of pounds. You're lying. It doesn't work like that. We're all at grassroots levels. We're all eliminating each other. It's actually ridiculous. And it was so sad as well because of my actions, it affected so many people. And what do I mean by this? At the time, I was unaware as well that My friend's sister was indicated. So now the police have taken her in for questioning. They're threatening her, saying that they're going to take away her children and everything. And that's her mother's worst nightmare. And she's a lot older. She's not even nowhere connected to us. Do you understand? But it happens because of they've connected the dots. You know how sometimes the police works. And she held it. She didn't say a single word. She could easily said that it was me. She didn't. I handed myself in. And I admitted.
Is that why you handed yourself in?
No, there was other contributing factors as well. The person that I was with as well, I found out he was a police informant. So it made sense as well, because we know about the joint enterprise. Remember this, I got my life sentence for that. There was another person with me. I'm happy he didn't, because I exonerated him. Irrespectively of what I said, he was there.
So the guy that you done this crime with was an informant?
Yeah. And he basically never spent a single day in prison.
Did he shoot a weapon?
No. I did. I done everything. So I'm not...
Would you say he was encouraging you?
Nope. I do things of my own volition, so I'm glad. No, but I'm actually glad that because he had nothing to do with it as well. I committed my crime. So I'm not, with some people, they become very bitter and they just want to blame everybody. I take full responsibility in what I've done. I'm just speaking my truth.
How did you find out he was an informant?
I was clear. I had the statements. So at the time, I was just a bit shocked as well, because I was just thinking, I've handed myself in. I've admitted to it. I've exonerated everybody. So why are you saying anything else? You don't need to say anything.
Did you know how much trouble you were going to be in once you handed yourself in?
No, not like that, because you have to also remember, at that time, a gun-related murder was only 20 years. And there was other cases that was going on. So, in between the time of 98 to early 2000s, there was a lot of gun offences. And there was even gun offences against police officers, and they weren't getting life sentences. So I was actually thinking that, I'll probably get 10 years, 11 years, and then I will be out. But little did I know that one of the gentlemen was actually fighting for their lives. He was that close. They were actually close of actually turning off the machine.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that at the time, no. Again, I take full responsibility for my actions. And again, I'm sorry that if any of the victims' families are watching this as well, this is not about glorification, and this is not about me allowing you to relive those painful experiences that you went through.
So take us through the subsequent trial and sentencing. How did that pan out? Do you think you got a fair trial?
See, we should be very careful here. I would actually say that what they say that their rules is, I don't feel that they follow their own protocol. And what I mean by this was, now they used to have a system called discretionary life sentence. That was 2 strikes and you're out. So you commit one violent offence, and if you commit another, that will make you eligible for a life sentence. This was before IPP. What I found that was very strange about this was a system that was implemented, I think it was in 97. Now, they're saying that for you to be valid a life sentence at that time, you needed to be a young adult. I was a minor when I committed my first offence. So even if I was convicted, even if they want to play around, so he was convicted at 15, I was still a minor. I was still under 16. I'm a minor. So it was weird that how they shift this. How they use that excuse as well in order to give me the life sentence is to basically say that because I committed my first violent offence when I was a minor, remember 13 years of age, that they've used that and plus the shooting in order to give me a discretionary life sentence, which their rules stated different. So from the time when that was implemented, which was 97, the discretionary life sentence, I haven't had any kind of other violent offences. So I shouldn't have merited a life sentence. Yes, they could have gave me 20 years and so forth. You do half in your release, but they didn't. But they did say that they believed that I'd done a string of shootings and I've got away with it. So this was their argument behind the reasons why. So they gave me a recommendation of 7 years, which I ended up, as you know, doing 22.
Your first night in prison, what was that like? What was going through your mind?
To be fair, very peaceful. I had no peace outside. That's the truth. And wallahi, it's so true. When you live an evil life, you don't have no peace. There's always paranoia, suspicion, can't trust anybody. You're angry, you're consuming yourself inside out. It's absolutely crazy. I remember the first day that door shut, even in the police station, and I can hear them cheering. I actually slept a whole full night.
You actually slept well.
I did, yeah. It was crazy. I used to have a lot of nightmares and things such as this, and it was very unpleasant.
Did you get into trouble a lot in prison?
Oh, definitely. I excelled in trouble. So it became a playground. I thought, okay, once the penny dropped and it actually dawned that I've actually got a life sentence now, I said the gloves are off. That's what I said. I said the gloves are off. Who are you to tell me what to do? So in those times, the officers were still military trained. So they had a way of articulating themselves as well and giving directions. They would more bark it rather than actually talk to you. I was also responsible as well. I'm not going to say all officers were bad. No, because I had an attitude as well, because obviously I'd done bad things.
Yeah.
It's a crazy combination.
But it must be difficult to, go from doing whatever you want outside of prison to all of a sudden, I've got to listen to this guy telling me what to do.
So when somebody's barking in your ears, like tucking your shirt and something, and then you give him some lip and he says, "What did you say?" And then for me, I came from a boxing background. So then next was using my fist, and then he's on the floor, and then press the bell, and then I saw the difference. Take out their truncheons, they're beating you, and then obviously that kind of willpower, that anger is still inside me. So I said, okay, when I see you again, I'll see the officer, and that just kind of repeated itself for many years, back and forth, just violence after violence after violence after violence. Kept on fighting, seg, block, back out, block, being beaten up, black eyes, cracked ribs, damaged wrists, everything. It didn't matter. I didn't care.
Was you ever involved in prison riots?
They accused me. So at the time when we was in Feltham, because we were still considered as young offenders before they started me up, me and my cousin was actually heading towards a visit. And because you have that, I had this mindset. It's a very polluted mindset, but sometimes when somebody's staring at you for a period that you find very uncomfortable, and I know the average person would still kind of find it uncomfortable, somebody's just constantly staring at you. But it could be many reasons why a person's looking at you. So sometimes you have to but being young, full of myself, I'm in prison, I don't really care. I had, at the time, I think I had roughly about 9 cousins that were in prison.
Wow.
And they had all their different co-defendants. So for us, it was all like an adventure playground. It's just like hearing, different news. What happened to this person, that person? Different people are getting arrested for different things. They were doing a cleanup. So this gentleman, he was he was a red band. He was big in size. And so I must have asked him a question. I said, who are you looking at? But obviously I done it in an aggressive way as well. He was not receptive to that. And he basically decided he wants this physical altercation with me. But not knowing, even though I'm smaller in size, but again, I come from a boxing background. So unfortunately for him, it never really worked out the way that he wanted to work out. By then, obviously, our visit was terminated. I mean, my cousin, because 4 of my cousins had the same surname as me. So we went back. So it was, I think at the time it was Quail and Partridge. We were facing each other. So I forgot what one I was. I think I was on Quail and he was on Partridge. He went through one gate. He was still arguing with the officers. I went through the other gate. Then the bell went off. And I turned around to the officer and I said, I hope that's not my cousin, I was like, no. But it was. I didn't know this at the time. My cousin was. And what I was led to believe was like a George Floyd moment, where that they basically had, their knee in his back, pulling back his neck. There happened to be some residents that were close to my cousin, and so forth. And I had other cousins that was on the wing. And they assaulted those officers. Everybody took their keys and started to open everybody up. So now there's a full-blown riot. So what they said was when the tornado team at the time they were called, or they call them nationals now, dealt with them. They said the reasons why they came for me next was because they heard, let's get Patterson. But what Patterson? There's lots of us. What they call me the ring. So they came for me and they moved me then on to Chelmsford. At the time, they put me onto the young offenders side. But I kind of we got like a hero's welcome because everybody knew about the whole riot situation. They said, nah, we can't have him here. Put him on the adult side. And they used to have a system in place. In those times, it would be a Caucasian guy, very big, spend a lot of time in the gym to get everybody else in order. He came to me and he says, boy, this is not young offenders or some kind of. And to be fair, I'm not saying he was racist or nothing, but you can't call a black or brown person boy. There's a lot of historical content here. What came next, and I think it was a shock for him as well. So now they were in a dilemma. Wait, we're sending these big guys and they're not winning. So what can we do? Eventually, they were at loggerheads. They didn't know what to do. And then I engaged with a teacher named Angela Herbert and Ian Mohammed. And they had belief in me when the system kind of gave up, saying that he's... And what she actually done was, she actually said that you're quite very intelligent, but you just need to know how to articulate yourself more and how to convey your words. So what I'm actually gonna do with you is as well that every day you're gonna learn a new word from the dictionary. And then she allowed me to give presentations, speaking to large groups. And then I started to fall in love again with books. Started to read a lot, started to educate myself a lot. Obviously, I was moved around the system. An incident happened when I was in Whitemore, where that another gentleman, he got his throat cut. He almost died. They accused me of perpetrating this. They said that I was one of the Muslim boy gang leaders and that we had control of the prison system. And they needed to they said something like 10 of us, and needed to take us out of general population. And this is what they done.
So was that true? Did you slice his throat?
No, I didn't. I went to court, actually. I had 3 trials. The criminal justice system and the prison system, when the first case got thrown out, they appealed, got me to the appeal courts, and I had to go through the trial again. They were so adamant. They were doing everything within their power. And I had 3 separate cases back to back, and I was going to court cases for all of them. Eventually, I was placed on what you call CSE. So that's the close supervision center.
Is that like solitary confinement?
Yeah. So that's what they consider to house the worst of the worst. So basically, literally what it is you've heard of Charles Bronson. Yeah. So they say that you are so dysfunctional in your behavior and your mannerisms. You're so dangerous, but they have no option but to keep you in solitary confinement. They placed me into solitary confinement, and that was just a whole different ballgame. It was totally different. It was nothing that I could ever comprehend. For example, as well, you have segregation as well. You have seg where that they separate you for a period of time. But with a CSE prisoner, you're considered that dangerous. So I had, for example, I had a 7-man unlock, full PPE. So that means like a riot shield, helmets. Then they would have a dog handler and a dog.
Just to intimidate you.
They will do something called double ratchet. So it'll be double handcuffed and handcuffed onto the officer. They can implement measures that they can't normally do just to an ordinary prisoner because you're considered to be so dangerous. When I was first initiated into the CSC, I weren't allowed any stationaries, no pens, no books. I couldn't have my trainers. They would actually give me clothing that was 2 sizes smaller. And I spoke to a professional about this, and he says that they use this in military prisons to break your confidence because you're considered. they considered me to be so influential that they said that initially I couldn't have neighbors. They said that there was a chance that I could be radicalizing them. So it came from an issue of me being a violent prisoner to all of a sudden a radicalizer. So it was very difficult, and it was difficult times.
Is it true that they accused you of being involved in some sort of terrorism?
Yeah, so basically what they said was, in order to put me onto national security, they believed that I had international links. I had international links with the Taliban. I had all these different groups of individuals that I was supposed to be in contact with.
So yeah, it's unbelievable.
I know, even though I was in solitary confinement. So how was I? They strip you bare. They move you from cell to cells. Some places they do it every month. Some is every 3 months. So they would move you all the time. So how was I having access to all these things? Tell me.
It just sounds like they had it in for you at this point.
What one officer said as well, he says that they just want their pound of flesh from you now. They said they always wait until when you're ready to make that change and that transition. And they just accused me. Some people ask me as well, how did you survive in solitary confinement? You have to also understand that in my life, I've always been kind of socially excluded. So if it was at school, being in the headmaster's office, playing with other kids, and they said I couldn't play with other kids because I was always fighting. And I used to say to myself, what's the matter with me? Why can't I just socialize with other children? But I realized that God was preparing me for what laid ahead for me. And on regards to what made me survive as well, whilst I was in solitary confinement, there was 4 things: belief in God, my family and friends, patience and discipline. What do I mean by belief in God? In Allah. Allah never given us a burden greater than what we can bear. What do I mean about friends and family? United we stand, divided we fall. So the support they gave. What do we mean about patience? A peace of mind is obtained by being patient. What do I mean about discipline? The world's a teacher to the wise man and the enemy to the fool. So this is how I actually survived. And not only that as well, I remember I was given some advice by a person that done 25 years in solitary confinement.
Man.
Yeah, 20 to 25 years he was in solitary confinement. He called him Big Robbo. And he says that, can I give you some advice? And he gave me some advice, like make sure you build up a timetable to keep your mind occupied. And he says one thing, when you do eventually get your television, because there's a process in everything, he says, make sure you at least watch cartoons because it softens the heart. And it's so true. And that's what allowed me the ability to forgive and also to be forgiven, first and foremost.
What was the worst things you seen in prison? I remember you telling a story about someone who got beaten up by the prison officers and actually wet himself.
Yeah. So I would say that psychologically that was the worst for me, because you have to also understand as well that his mother just passed away. So all he wanted to do was just make a phone call to his family. And obviously he was on CSC himself. He's not a friend of ours because you would consider this person to be far right. He doesn't like anything that doesn't look like him, ignorant people. But at that point, I still had compassion because he's a human being. Right. And it really dawned on me. I remember that. And the officer pulled a flap because they're kind of very robotic. They're like the SAS of the officers. They're trained. They're good at what they do. And there's no denying it. So sometimes people can lie, yeah, I had all this and that. They know what they're doing. They drill this all the time. He said to the officer, can I make the phone call? He says, no, you know the rules. Come on, have some compassion. So he's frustrated. So he kicks the door. So he says, "Gang, kick the door one more time and see what happens." He kicked it again. I'll never forget it. He said, "Come on, lads, you see the excitement. Come on, lads, let's suit up." And the shields and everything. They beat him so much. Never known as a human being to wet themselves. Wet themselves, there's blood, he's crying out. And even everybody in union was saying that, look, just leave him now. And I just knew then, it was so sad. Because even one of the officers, I was thinking, look at this. You had compassion for. I remember once I think I was going dentist. So I had to have all these. They had to contact the police as well and have the police car follow and everything else as well. And I remember once he took off his visor, his helmet, and the dog handler was there. And he was stroking, he was hugging the dog, the Alsatian. Yeah. And I said, look at the compassion he's showing. Yeah, I like animals too. But I'm saying that he can't even show even an atom's weight of compassion to another fellow human being.
It's as if he saw inmates as less than
the dog, yeah. We were, because we were considered to be dangerous. So to us, it was fair game for them. No one's going to care. Who's going to care? A dangerous prisoner. He's so dangerous that he needs to be in solitary confinement. I spent 7 years in that.
Did they allow you to like pray and, have a Quran?
Of course, eventually. But there was other psychological games. Like, for example, the Quran would be ripped because they like to move you around a lot. The officers came to me first and said, we didn't do this. I said, what do you mean? They showed me my Quran. The spine of the Quran was ripped. So these are the kind of psychological games that they would play. Damage all your property. When you are eventually allowed to have your property, they will do games like, for example, let's say that you have to apply in the morning. They will sometimes wait until it's time for Salah or something and then come round and then says, do you want exercise? Oh, so I will consider that as a refusal. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Okay. Then that's no exercise, there's no shower.
Do you think they wanted you to kick off just so they can come in and rush you?
And I did. And unfortunately, that resulted in me having another court case eventually. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. They do this.
We were talking earlier before the podcast, weren't we, that sometimes trouble just finds you, and even if you're trying to avoid it, sometimes just trouble just finds its way to you.
100%. But sometimes you have to have the motivation and the ability to know that, you know what, let them carry that burden rather than me carrying somebody else's burden. Let's try to look at the bigger picture. I know it can be difficult.
So many people are of the opinion that a leopard can't change its spots. What do you think about that saying? Are you actually a changed man, or is this all a persona?
I like that concept when they say a leopard, because I agree. A leopard can't change its spots because a leopard's an animal. We're not animals. I'm a human being. So you have to understand the complexity of the human mind. And of course, people are always evolving or digressing. So the question you have to pose to yourself is as well, which one are you? Are you digressing or are you evolving? And so for me, first and foremost is I only answer to God. I don't really care about the opinions of others. Because you know what? One thing that I've learned, and especially within this kind of media outlet as well, blame and praise is a part of this world. Some people are going to like me and some people are going to dislike me. It's just a part of life. What can I do? I can't be anxious over that. I just need to live my life.
If you could go into a time machine and go to Dwaine Patterson sitting in solitary confinement and say something to him, what would you say?
I'll say continue having sabr. Continue to have patience. And that's what I would actually say. Because we don't understand the magnitude of patience. And somebody said this to me as well. What one word would you actually say? I'll say patience, because when I was in prison incarceration, you have to have patience in everything. Whether that's waiting for a phone call, whether that's going on a visit, whether that's to be released, whether that's see your parole board, everything is based on patience. I said, if we can utilize that patience and bring it back out into the working world, we'll be scholars in our field.
Reason why I'm smiling, because it brings me back to the start of this podcast. And what did your father tell you to do?
Have patience.
Have patience. We got the pops.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100%.
Since you've been out, you've been released, how much more do you appreciate freedom, and what are you up to nowadays?
Wow, it's been so amazing. Obviously, I'm married for 8 years.
So how did you meet your wife, man?
Oh, she's a friend of the family.
Okay.
So when I came out of solitary confinement, I just thought there was so much male testosterone. I just needed that kind of female aspect of things. I asked my brother, and because she was friend of like my brothers, my sisters, my cousins, the whole family knew her. I was saying that, is there anybody? And I said, you know what, she's bubbly. She's the opposite from you. You're quite quiet. Yeah. She's lively. She'll bring it out of you. Yeah. And we were like friends and talking for about a year. And then we just felt that there was more to this. She inspired me, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then we got married. We got married Islamically, but the prison weren't still recognizing it at the time because I was in open conditions by then.
So you got married whilst you were in jail?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whilst I was in open conditions.
What did she think about this whole thing, meeting a guy that's in prison?
Yeah, at first, obviously she charged the judgment of my family, but it was very strange. She never knew that it would reach, that she would end up falling in love with me. I've fallen in love with her, and obviously it was very hard for her as well because her friends and her family were saying, you're crazy. Obviously they heard their rumors and they checked and said, oh, this is a gangster, this is a dangerous person. But then they got to know me as well. And it's just time. Yeah. It's just understanding that, we all have preconceived ideas. And sometimes it's about dismissing those preconceived ideas.
I mean, it's amazing how much change a woman can bring into your life. And that's why women are thought so highly of in Islam.
100%. We know that paradise is underneath your mother's feet. And we always need to remember this. It's a woman that gives birth to nations. But yeah, even sometimes when I feel the weight of the world upon my shoulders, she's the one that is encouraging me. Look, I never married a pussycat. I married a lion. Come on. As what you said, what am I doing now with my time as well? So I will be starting work at St. Giles Trust, working as an embedded mentor, identifying young people that are at risk.
Amazing.
Of being involved in gangs. But that doesn't end here. What I would like to say to some of the general public as well, I'd like to do more things. So please, if there's anybody as well, that there is a lot of things that I have in mind that I would like to do. Or if we need to really try to find a solution to a problem. It don't only end at schools. We need to know that this is something that starts from the household as well, that we need to explore. I've also, thanks to Mr. Lord Hastings as well, I've had the opportunity of going into a prison, giving a talk, a presentation, which was very nice. Obviously, I've gone into business in partnership with my very good brother, Jojo. He was in solitary confinement with me. Oh, really? And we have this clothing brand called Primrose Hill. Yeah. And the reasons why, some people ask, why Primrose Hill? Because there's two Primrose Hills garden. There's one in Coventry, where he's actually from.
Right.
And there's one in London.
London as well, yeah.
So we combine the both, Coventry and London, together, unity. And the reasons, they say, why the rose? And I posed this question as well. And I said, even a rose has thorns, but it doesn't stop people from admiring and appreciating its beauty.
That reminds me of Tupac's A Rose That Grew From Concrete. Do you know that poem?
Do you know what? I've explored it a tiny bit. But no, I know there's even another poem before that they believe that Tupac got the idea from. So yeah, and as you know already, roses has thorns, but it doesn't stop people from admiring and appreciating. So what we're saying is, yeah, we've got a past, we've got a history, but give us a chance. Help us. We just need help. Like, there's also something I'm looking into now, which is more community leaders trying to be caseworkers, trying to help our communities, our youths, and it's called Uncles. What we're trying to build now, we need funding. So what does Uncles mean? It means unity, nurturing, community, life skills, empowerment, and survival skills. And what we want to do is add value to some of the other agencies that are there already, build the bridges between the young, some of the young gang members and older gang members, and with the general population or the public as well, and to change the mindsets. But in order for us to do that, and also to help, let's be honest, because when I first came out as well, the world has dramatically changed. And I've always said that there's three things that need to be addressed: accommodation, occupation, and finance.
What would the funding help you achieve?
It will allow us to pay the workers, because we're all doing it for free right now, as caseworkers, recognized, when they enroll to us, that we can take them out. Just basic things like CV writing, job centre, building their confidence, travelling around the London transport. That's something that I found difficult at first. Yeah. Even using devices like your phone. So things like this, basic things, but basic things that are so important for them that will that could prevent them from actually reoffending and making them feel in touch with society, being a part of society. But in order for us to do that, we also need to have funds. We can't do these things without funds.
The way the world works, man.
This is correct.
So we'll post the link. So if anyone wants to donate to such a good cause, please do so. May Allah reward you. And brother, that's very inspirational, man. Well done.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So Dwayne, if you could say one last thing to the world, what would your message be?
That after difficulty comes ease. It comes two eases. And what some scholars have actually interpreted that as saying that after difficulty comes ease. It's like a blacksmith, if you will, that is shaping a piece of steel. He puts it in the fire, he beats it, he cools it. He puts it back in the fire, he beats it, he cools it. This is the way God forges men and women of character. He does not forge us into great men and women without the fire, the water, the beatings. These are the difficulties of life. We must face them, we must overcome them.
You've been Unchained. Thanks, brother, for joining me, man.
Thank you very much for having me as well.
It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you.
Love, brother.
Thank you.